Hi, everybody. I am Raychelle Fernandez, Vice President of Dynamic Health IT. Thanks so much for joining us. I hope you're having a really good day. We're going to go ahead and cover FHIR the Fax. And yes, that pun is intended. If you'd like to reach me, you can email me at Raychelle@dynamichealthit.com or connect at Raychelle Fernandez on LinkedIn. Here at Dynamic Health IT, we specialize in quality measures and interoperability solutions. We have over 55 EHR strategic partners, and we offer them modular certification for 2015 edition. We're currently working on updating all of our products to support 2015 edition Cures update. We already have a good bit of the clinical notes created. We've handled the pediatric vital signs, and we're working towards, as well as provenance, and we're working towards updating our FHIR server to R4. Very excited to talk to you today about closing the referral loop, which involves the transition of care document and our dynamic FHIR server and what we're accomplishing there and the industry issues that we have resolved in the process and the gotchas that still exist. Okay, so let's jump right in. So CMS challenge developers to have a fax-free zone by 2020. Well, despite CMS naming a day of the week Fax-Free Friday, the use of faxing increased according to the latest ONC data brief, which came out March 2020. This increase is a good thing because it's secure messages are being shared. It's a bad thing that is being done via fax, as ONC certification 2014 and 2015 both have direct protocol as part of the transportation of that CCA to be delivered to the patient portal, as well as to it can be delivered to the patient portal, but to other care providers, it should be delivered via direct. About 7 in 10 hospitals continue to use mail or fax for sending and receiving summary of cares as of 2018. That was just 2 years ago. This survey was, this information comes from 2017, 2018, so I dived a little bit deeper to see what I can find out what's going on closer to now. Well, despite CMS pouring money into EHR development, the least commonly used method for sending and receiving summary of care records was direct access to EHR via a remote or terminal access, which means they're not using the technology the way it was meant to be used through certification. So what's happening there? Why is the breakdown occurring? Well, 2019-2020 also found that in the survey, the state of healthcare communication, heavily reliance on outdated technology hindered communication in healthcare. 90%, that's so much, of healthcare organizations are still using that fax machine. Now, Direct Trust has something to celebrate because people are using Direct Trust. There still seems to be a little problem there. So although Direct Trust celebrated 1 billion messages exchanged in 2019, the workflows have not been adjusted to allow easy transition from faxing to direct in the hospital or doctor office environment. So let's take some baby steps here. And I found this cute little baby as well. Wanted to put him on here because this probably happens very often. You taught my 62-year-old coworker how to download an app, and she taught me how to use a fax machine. There's a technology gap there, and everybody can learn from someone. In some instances, when I've talked to offices about the fax, I asked, why? What's going on? And I actually had some people tell me, it's like going cold turkey from an addiction to take that fax machine out of this office. They compare it to quitting smoking, reducing sugar intake, and going gluten-free. It's hard and it's disruptive. Disruptive is what we want. We want to disrupt healthcare. We want to do it differently. We want to do it better, and we can do it better. But things have to change, and we have to have the technology out there. We have to be implementing the technology, and it has to be user-friendly. In some areas, the fax might just be the only available method of transportation of transporting that information. In other instances, cold turkey might just be the best bet. So let's talk about closing the referral loop. And I'm going to give you an example really quickly about closing the referral loop so you understand the process I'm talking about. So I go to my primary care doctor, and I'm doing my annual checkup, and he asks me if I have any issues, any problems going on, and I'm like, well, yeah, I have shortness of breath and fatigue, and sometimes I just can't breathe correctly. I have to take a break from activity. And he says, well, that's interesting because you are wheezing some and your lungs don't sound completely clear. So I'm going to have you go to a specialist and have your lungs checked with a pulmonologist. Okay, that sounds great. So he's going to go ahead and take care of that referral for me and possibly even get me a doctor's appointment set up for that doctor's. Now, of course, his administrative staff is helping with that process. He's already moved on to the next patient. But the appointment might get scheduled while I'm in the current office, and if not, I'll schedule it myself. So before I get to the doctor's office, I'm expecting them to send this this direct trust message, and I've added the direct trust to this as well as the FHIR images, and the little doctors and nurses have been added as well to help understand how many people are involved in this process and where the breakdown occurs. So direct trust is here. And I would anticipate when I got to the doctor's office, he would have some information for me on file. Once he sees me and diagnoses me, he is going to give me a plan of care, maybe put some information in my patient portal. Some patient information will be provided to let me know more about asthma or bronchitis, whichever I might have, or maybe I just have shortness of breath. And there's some activities I need, maybe I'm out of shape. So he's going to give me that information. Once he has that, he should be sending a message out via direct to my primary care provider to let him know what the diagnosis was and the treatment, so that the primary care provider will get a CCDA via direct. They will also send back a message delivery notification, letting them know that that message was received. And this should be an automatic process. After the message is sent, it should automatically trigger and let the specialist know that message was received. And then my primary care doctor can decide if he needs to make an adjustment to my care plan and let me or my family know that that needs to occur. That's closing the referral loop. Okay, so where are the breakages? Well, the Institute of Health and of Healthcare Improvements estimated that up to 50% of referrals are never completed. So somewhere in this process, it's breaking down. Reason for the incomplete referrals: missing information, misdirected referrals, sent it to the wrong direct address, wrong fax number, not sure there. Faulty communication, maybe the fax wasn't working, or maybe the direct protocol wasn't set up properly in the EHR and they couldn't send the message. So if approximately 70% primary care providers are sending patient history, but get this is sad. Less than 35% of the specialists are receiving patient history. So somewhere this protocol is just totally breaking down, and we need to figure out why. Because 12 million diagnosis errors per year occur in the US, with 20 to 30% are caused by breakdown in referral process. Missed and delayed diagnosis is common cause of medical malpractice in ambulatory care. So if we can fix this referral loop, we're fixing a good bit, and we're providing better patient care. And if FHIR was in here at these levels, there's no interaction from a person. This is an API communicating information back and forth to each other on an open channel. Okay, so what do we need to do for baby steps? We know they're not getting rid of the fax. They're using the fax. They keep using the fax. So how do you incorporate that fax into the workflow? How do you integrate the fax to the EHR system? Well, there's lots of vendors out there doing this. No2 is one we work directly with, and that No2 takes in faxes, and they use patient info derived from that fax to support for a patient query to our dynamic FHIR server. They search for the patient. Once they know the patient exists, we let them know the patient ID. That patient is then provided the attachment that came in via the fax in the EHR system, and a lookup can be done in the single sign-on to No2 to understand what information is available for the provider. And this is not just CCDAs. This is all attachments. This could be a PDF. It could be a note from a doctor. It could be a JPEG. It can be an image from a radiology test that was done. So that information is going to be stored for the patient. And once that patient is seen, that a new CCDA is going to be created and sent out via a FHIR document reference to No2, so that No2 can share that with the HIE, Commonwealth, Care Quality, and the original place where the CCDA came from, where the fax originated from. So this is how we close the referral loop and incorporate the fax and use it for good instead of just throwing it out with the bathwater. Okay, so while we were doing this implementation, we ran into a bit of a snag. It works great with one EHR. You have one FHIR server, one EHR. We're in great shape. But we have hospital systems that we support, and they have our patient portals at 45 different locations, and they might exist across 14 states, and there's also foundation hospitals. So it's really important that we don't recreate the issue with the patient portal having to be in every location when we have a FHIR API. The FHIR API should be part of the health system, and that health system can have one FHIR API, but set up as a multi-tenant environment, and that multi-tenant environment allows information to transfer through that one FHIR server. So let's talk about that for a minute, and I'm going to show you a diagram next. It's for multi-tenant environment, you need to have a tenant ID in the FHIR server endpoint, and it can distinguish the different practices or different tenants. There's an audience parameter, OAuth requested parameter specified by SMART is used during this request. This prevents leaking of genuine bearer tokens to a counterfeit resource server. There's a little note here you can read about EHR launch if needed. Multiple practice environments. In these multiple practice environments, there's two scenarios. One with an endpoint without a tenant ID, and one in an endpoint with a tenant ID. Separate client IDs can be used in the without a tenant endpoint to isolate the practice. Each client ID can be grouped to a specific practice or a practice of its choice. This comes mostly when you have one FHIR endpoint for multiple practice environments. Now there's also the FHIR endpoint with tenant ID, and the tenant ID can be used to identify the targeted practice that the resource needs to fetch it from. So the audience parameter is the OAuth token exchange can be entered with the FHIR endpoint, different FHIR URLs. So something like authentication code flow, SMART backend process. Okay, so here's the diagram I promised, and there's a workflow here that you can follow. I don't think I'm going to have enough time to go into it, but please take a minute when you have time, review this slide. Super helpful workflow of how we're doing the SMART part of this, the tokens being shared, the identity server, the FHIR server. We also have this master connect EHR server that has the list of providers and practices that are connecting with separate Connect EHR applications that create CCDAs or deliver CCDAs to a database. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the security considerations. Authentication. Users and clients must be authenticated for web-centric OAuth is recommended. Key rotations. Any application or API that validates access tokens must regularly update the set of public keys it uses for signature validation. Communication security. All communication, production, or even staging should occur in a TLS environment, using secure TLS. This includes HTTPS. Audits. FHIR defines provenance and audit event resources suitable for tracking the origin, authorship, history, status, and access of resources. Also, there's labels. Labels are very important. FHIR allows for sets of security-related tags that affect the way resources are handled. Okay, so last year I came to FHIR DevDays and I talked about how everything's disconnected and that unless ONC steps up and names a standard for these APIs, we're just going to be in another fit with almost similar to doing interface point-to-point. Well, ONC did. They stepped up, they laid down the law, and CMS as well, and they said, in 2015 edition CURES update, you have to use and implement smart technology. You need to upgrade to R4 of FHIR for all apps. Multiple factor authentication needs to happen, which is part of the smart technology. Info blocking is restricted and not allowed, and there will be fines that will occur if this happens. So how do you prevent info blocking? You incorporate USCDI data elements, US core data for interoperability, which replaces the CCDS. This includes things like clinical notes, provenance, and pediatric vital signs. You also have to make sure that you're able to export electronic health information, EHI. That export needs to be electronic. So you have to be able to get that information out of your system if you're capturing it. Okay, so let's talk about Smart on FHIR because that's part of ONC certification requirements and it's going to help with this big picture. So APIs must utilize Smart and support multi-security launches. Smart App Launch has EHR launch and standalone launch. The standalone launch is what we use with Apple Health Kit and MyLinks, and the EHR launch is being launched from a session within the EHR. There's also Smart Backend Services. This profile is intended to be used by developers for backend services, the clients, that autonomously or semi-autonomously need to access resources from FHIR servers that have pre-authorized defined scopes and access. This is mostly server-to-server FHIR connections. The resource requests can be limited to the provided scope. The scope decides the type of resources the service of the app can have access to. Example, system observation.read. So when we were talking about the No2 work, we did this type of backend service authorization, but we did it using shared secrets. We didn't do it just with a public key. Okay, so wrapping up here, I want to show you, I want to go back to the ONC. I'm sure you've seen this several times by now, but this is the ONC information blocking timeline and what needs to be accomplished between now and 2023. Mainly, we're focusing on this item I added here because currently we're going to have to do it this way. We're going to have to piecemeal it, fax machines, FHIR, any way we can to get data out. But come 2022, when everybody is using the APIs and they're enabled and it's FHIR R4 and they're also using Smart to connect for that security process, we can, at that point, burn the fax machines. Anybody want to sign up with me to go burn some fax machines post 2022? This is when we can say there's no reason for you to be using a fax, as well as for payers. Everybody needs to switch to this API process. Okay, so that kind of wraps it up. I'm going to leave you with this slide. I intend to live forever. So far, so good. And I'm talking about the fax machine there. I don't think that's what Steve Wright was talking about, but food for thought. Okay, everybody, thanks so much for joining. I look forward to your questions. Have a great day. Bye.